Spooky Tuesday.
See, you could be getting that girl pregnant right now.
And don't forget about all the Swedish women you can impregnate in June.
Okay, guys.
Don't forget about all the Swedish milkmaids. That's not her again. Seriously? Oh my God. She needs a therapist, dude.
She has a therapist.
Oh, so then she should call her therapist and not you.
It's literally abuse.
She's abusing you.
Excuse me.
Nope.
Oh my God. Okay, excuse me, guys. Wow.
Great.
Hey. Danny. Babe.
Hey guys, welcome back to Spooky Tuesday, a weekly podcast where we're breaking down all of our favorite slashers, thrillers, monster movies, and black comedies on the new scariest day of the week. I'm Sydney Thompson.
I'm Monica Height.
And I'm Chelsea Duff.
And this week on the podcast, we are talking about a movie that is very near and dear to my heart. And that movie is called Midsommar.
Is it Midsommar or Midsommar?
So I've looked into this, and Ari Aster said it goes either way. You can say Midsommar or you could say Midsommar. So either way, you are correct. You are right. And you're going to have a good time unless you're Sydney, maybe. I don't know.
That is so fun, though, because we said last week, it doesn't matter. You can say it whatever way. And I thought we were just bullshitting. But as it turns out, there's some basis to that. Good to know.
It's true. It's like Ari and I have some sort of like connection where we just like get each other. And I like, he didn't even have to tell me and I just knew, you know?
Wow, that's beautiful
Yeah,
for you
that's
too. Do you
what it was
have
like.
another connection that you're perhaps visually displaying that you turned into a visual display as part of a surprise in that moment that you'd like to share?
Yes, the surprise is that I myself am the May Queen.
Wow.
And I've been dancing all day and all the other high bitches fell down except for me. And so, yes, I am the May Queen. And also I spent like the entire day reading about this movie, and that was a marathon in and of itself. And so I feel like I've earned this, you know? And also I stole this flower crown that was like a decoration on a wall at a concert I went to on my birthday 3 years ago. So if that's not a win as well, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and just in case you missed it, as Monica didn't highlight this up front, but she is in fact wearing a flower crown, and she did in fact have her camera turned off when we started this pause so that it could be a reveal, and it was gorgeous.
Oh, thank you very much, and I will be posting that on Instagram. But okay, in case you don't know anything about this absolutely psychotic but beautiful 2019 film, this is the synopsis on IMDb. A couple travels to Scandinavia to visit a rural town's fabled Swedish midsummer festival. What begins as an idyllic retreat quickly devolves into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of a pagan cult. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's got a lot in there, you know?
It does. And something I really enjoyed reading about this movie. I also obviously loved watching it, but reading about the movie, Ari Aster was just like, yeah, so you pretty much kind of know what's going to happen in this movie from the beginning, barring a few twists that are shocking. But like all these fucking idiots from America are going to a Swedish festival in the middle of nowhere, like this cult commune kind of vibe. Like, you know, they're going to each be killed one by one. But it's really fun seeing how it happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, spoilers for this whole movie if you haven't seen it yet. But I was a little late to the game, not super late to the game, but a little late to the game. And this movie was so like everywhere in the cultural conversation and like all over Tumblr and everything. So I had already seen a lot of like the Danny's like screaming scene with the women, and I already knew about Christian and the bear and the role other characters play in making that happen. So I knew like the largest spoilers going into the film when I watched it for the first time a few years ago. but it still is really interesting to watch unfold and see like how you get there. Sydney, I know you hadn't seen it before you watched it for this episode, but what did you know about it going in? Did you already know everything?
So I knew that kind of basically, I knew all the memes. I knew all of like most of the like visual images or some of the visual images because they were everywhere. I knew she killed her boyfriend and like he got stuffed into a bear suit, but like some of the little details, like I didn't know anything about the beginning of this movie, which was like, oh, okay. And I did
it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, do be fucked up.
Right? I was just like, oh, okay, we're going there immediately. Love this.
And that's the Ari Aster of it all, my friends. Because I saw this movie like in theaters when it came out. Because I was like so fucking stoked for this. Because I saw Hereditary the year before, and I saw it in theaters with my friend Duncan and my friend Hawk, and I absolutely like crushed the small bones in their hands because I was just holding on for dear life the whole time. And so all I was following like the trailers and the announces for this movie for like whatever the whole year, like was so stoked. And like usually when I hype things up that much in my mind, they really let me down. Like this one, there's not a lot like it, you know what I mean? Like a horror film that is completely in the blinding daylight, except for the beginning. And I like that there's that juxtaposition in the movie too, that the first act is super, super incredibly dark in all senses. And then the second act is just like blinding light. And also just like costuming, like world building, all of it. They like really go all the way in on creating this world, and like I'm a fucking sucker for world building, man. So I fucking loved this movie.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, because both Sydney and I knew about the bear thing and like that being like, you know, that's the ending of the film. That's also arguably like the climax. And so I think I didn't expect there to be like too many surprises or shocks left, but the sort of the not the beginning of things being horrifying in this movie because that's minute one, but the beginning of things being horrifying with the Midsommar Festival and the Harga community with the elders at the cliff. I did not know about, did not know was coming, was just as horrified as all of the other Americans
as the
and outsiders
right?
on scene. Yeah, like that will getcha.
Oh yeah, there's nothing worse than an unexpected like suicide.
Yeah. And the gore of it, truly, there it's so much. Because it's not just that it is gory and realistic, and they show you the effects of jumping off a cliff on the human body with the first woman. It's also with the man, and that he does not die on impact, and then they go in and they smash his head, and then they just keep smashing his head. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot in that moment.
Oh, totally. And it's just, again, like I've only seen does Ari have more than 2 movies? I think these are his first 2 movies, Hereditary and then Midsommar, and then he's got another one coming out. I think Joaquin Phoenix is in it, which will be cool. I love Joaquin. But yeah, he like has this, there's trends in both movies where it's just like everything is calm and everything is chill and you can't expect anything to be going on, everything's fine, and then boom, the most disturbing thing you've ever seen just happens in front of your fucking face. And I'm not going to spoil Hereditary for Sydney because I'm going to make her watch it and do it on this podcast, but I'll wait a long time because I'm not sure if she'll like that one either.
Yeah, we'll give you like a year or something.
Yeah, we'll give you a while. Also, it's too much horror
back to back.
back.
So here's the thing, I didn't find this movie scary at all. Like nothing about it scared me. Like even like it was like disturbing a little bit, and you're just sitting there and you're like, what the fuck? But even like, and some, especially with like the elders cliff diving to their deaths, because
I like putting it that way.
Sure.
Like it's like that was uncomfortable. Like it was really a graphic visual, but like in our society and our culture, you know, like you want to live and like die in your sleep at an old age. And so it's like
Mhm.
super uncomfortable for somebody who we would consider incredibly young at 72
Yeah.
to be like,
My
okay,
dad is
we're too old
74.
now, right? Like we're too old now. But I will say though, I do enjoy the fact that they get to whenever they want to, they're like, you know what? I'm done. And the society's like, that's fine. You don't have to be
It's
here
not
anymore.
whenever they want to. It's at 72.
Yeah, but that's okay. Know what I mean? Like, because they're raised to want to, die at 72. They're like,
Yeah,
okay, we're
I
good now.
mean,
Goodbye.
It's just a life cycle. It's really interesting.
I do think that it's a little strange, and I mean, obviously, it's strange in a lot of very obvious ways.
It's a little strange that
It's
they
just
have
a little weird that they do
ritual
this. That They
death.
have a suicide cult. I just think it's a kind of strange. No, but I think one thing that did stand out to me about the 72 of it all is that it's kind of a strange number. You know what I mean? Pele explains it as they have like their seasons of their life from birth to age 18 is your spring, and then from 18 to 36 is fall, and then 36 to 54. Yep. You get it. But there's like room for a whole other 18-year life cycle to age 90. Plenty of people live to 90, and the number 90 is also significant to them and to their culture and their beliefs and their practices, because this is like this isn't the normal Midsummer Festival. This is the big one that they only have every 90 years. And so it's really interesting to me that they've got this like 90-year cycle, but people are only allowed to live to 72 within that cycle. So there are going to be plenty of people who like never get to experience this specific festival ever. They're just going to fall in that in time. People live to 90 naturally, you know what I mean? So I thought it was a little strange that they just cut it off, but I guess
it's
that
an ancient culture. So like back in the
well,
day, 90 years ago, who that
Right?
long,
Like,
you know what I mean?
well,
70 was.
sure. But what's interesting is that I'll dive into this part of it later, which is the like good for her versus actually this is not a good for her white supremacy cult of it all movie. But one of the articles that I read about the white supremacy aspect of it was saying that you can really draw a lot of comparisons to like Confederacy culture in the United States, especially when it comes to the discussion surrounding taking down Confederate statues, where it's like part of us is like not part of us, but some people are like, well, they've been around since they've been around since the Civil War. It's part of history. It's we want to remember our history. And then it's one of those things where it's like, actually, a lot of those statues didn't even go up until the 1960s as part of the civil rights movement and as in response to the civil rights movement. So there are these things that we pretend are old and ancient and rooted in our culture, and they're really not. They were very much like reactionary. And one theory that I read about this was that this cult has really only been around for maybe 30 years or so, because they have pictures of their May Queens, and they've only got like 30 pictures of the May Queens. And so if they say this is every May Queen we've had, they've only been doing this for like 3 decades. They haven't really been doing it that long.
Okay, but what if they only had access to cameras 30
Yeah.
years ago?
Yeah. That also
Maybe,
scans
but-
for me because they've got kind of like a rural culture. And also, yeah, I mean,
But
this big festival only happens once every 90 years. But yeah, I didn't think
Yes.
about that I must do a little version of it every
Yeah,
year.
and-
Well, last
and-
year's May Queen, but there's less
Mhm.
murder on the other years, I guess.
Right,
Murder
right.
So they'd
But-
have to not do the murder every year, because then I think people would be suspicious. Like,
Oh, totally.
why are all of these people going missing from this very tiny Scandinavian town?
And also there's like a thing with it where each person kind of that gets sacrificed because there's 9 equals 10 years of like prosperity and protection for the culture of these people. What is it? How do you say it? The Harga?
Harga.
Harga, yeah. And so, they're covered for 90 years, you know. Why do extra murder if you don't have to? You're already going to have the cliff diving every year cuz I would imagine not every year, but every few years someone's going to turn 72.
72.
Sure. But these are my two counterpoints. And number one is that a lot of the rituals that they referenced as being like ancient and as something that they have always done, like the I'm gonna try to say it, I think it's like at a stupa or whatever, the cliff diving. They're like, this is something that's always been done. And there are references to that in like historical documents, but only in terms of like talking about other societies and kind of being like, isn't that society fucked up that they do that? So there's no record of this ever actually happening or being a real practice. Which is to say that again, it seems like it's one of those things that they have sort of co-opted for their use and co-opted for their cult and their belief system that is not necessarily drawn from actual history. And so it could be one of those things where they say like, this is an ancient thing that we do, but like it's not really. Same with, it's called the blood eagle or whatever. What happens with the guy's lungs?
We're
Do you know what
covering
I mean?
everything in the beginning. Yeah.
I know, but I'm trying to be slightly vague because anything could happen with somebody's lungs. But that scene specifically, like that is also like a historically referenced thing to do to someone.
Yeah.
And there is not like necessarily proof that it was something that anyone ever actually did. So it's not necessarily one of those things that's been like passed down to them for generations and generations,
Yeah.
so much as it could still them be just them being like, we are a modern cult who are trying to pretend that this has been around forever.
I think that's an interesting take because like this movie like it exists in a fictional world, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like the writers got the ideas from those ancient cults or whatever, but just because those were written in that way where like other cultures would report on a certain culture's practices, like it's clear in the movie that there's nothing really documented about the Harga people because that's why what's his name, Josh, is that Chidi
Yeah.
/ Jackson?
Yeah.
Is his last name Harper?
William
Whatever
Harper
his last
Jackson, something like that.
William Harper Jackson. There we go. Yeah, William Jackson Harper. There we go. We got there. 3 names. Is he going to be a serial killer one day? I hope not.
No, that's not how serial killers only have 3 names because they were like 2 name people and then they used their middle name in
to
the
identify
like news
them.
coverage to be like this specific person. So it's not that like people with 3 names become serial killers. It's that anyone who becomes serial killers, other than I guess Ted Bundy, we reference with all 3 of their names.
But anyway, like look what Josh's character is all about. Like there's no info on this anywhere. No one has pictures of that ancient book that I can't remember the name of. Like this is like a culture that's been
Ruby
like
Raider.
The Ruby Raider or something like the Ruby Raider. That is not what I would expect to be called.
Yeah, Ruby Raider.
Oh, cool.
Or Raider or something like that. Pronunciation, you know. How
many umlauts are in that?
None. Not in the subtitles. But it is RUBI and then RADR. So you're missing what could be some filler letters that would guide the pronunciation.
There's got to be some sort of like rolling of an R or something that makes it sound different than Ruby Raider. But
they say it in a Swedish accent also, so you know.
But that definitely helps.
But like, yeah, I totally see where you could come up with that idea, but I just think that this is just an ancient cult that's been doing this for forever that just is not well documented because this exists in its own world, you know. This isn't real.
But I also think, to me, it's maybe more interesting and more sinister to think that it's not as ancient as they would like you to think that it is.
Totally. I just didn't read it that way. But yeah, I totally agree that it would be fucked up if they were just like, what if we pretended to be a cult steeped in
that's how they
in history
indoctrinate new people. You know what I mean? By being like, this is just our culture and it always has been, instead of like, we started this in the 70s and things got wild. Which is, you know, that's a different movie entirely if you're upfront about that. But my second thing is that I'm not convinced that murder only happens every 90 years, even if this is a long-standing every 90 years for multiple 90 years cycles now at this time. I think, you know, it's one thing, it's like Ready or Not. We talked about it a little bit with Ready or Not. You know what I mean? You have to fully to commit ritual sacrifice in such a way, you have to be like numbed to it or desensitized to it. So I think that for them to be prepared to commit these murders, and so gruesomely in some cases and so artfully in some cases, there's probably other murders happening. And I it sounds like it would be one of those things where it'd be like, why do people keep going missing in the Harga community? But also Pele specifically says like nobody knows exactly where Harga is other than people who live there. And I think it's one of those things like the hills
American
have eyes
backpackers
where
in the
where
wood,
it could
yeah.
be like, why do people keep disappearing in the New Mexico desert? But the desert is so large and rural areas are so large and rural that if you don't know what specifically to look for or where to look, you just might never find anything. So they might be like, people keep going to Sweden and disappearing, but we have no further leads beyond that.
I have a saying, being from Alabama, which is, you know, very dense forest. If you get caught for murder in Alabama, you're just lazy.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
Sweet Lord. Well, okay, good to know next time I'm in Alabama. Jesus Christ.
Good to know next time you decide to have 3 names in Alabama, but not so much if you are just a 2-namer like the rest of us. Actually, I'm a 4-namer, but that's nobody's business but mine.
It's nobody's business. But yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, Chelsea. But again, I think that like because their culture, like obviously they're like taught these things like their whole entire way of life, like from birth to death, and every other year or whatever, they watch grandma and grandpa jump off a cliff. And like and they have a freaking period blood pube ritual, you know what I mean? And when they have sex, 50 grandmas are there and they touch your butt. Like literally, like all of the things that they do are ridiculous and super intense, you know, and they've been like taught that fine
So
with that.
like,
So I don't
what's a
think they
little
need to
murder?
have killed before to be able to kill now. They're told that they
Sure.
have to, and so that's what it is. Like for example, and I don't want to get too far ahead of us. Like Ulf, I love his name, Ulf. When stupid ass Mark pisses on Rotvala or whatever it's called, the ancient tree that they literally put the ashes
tree
of the dead
ancestors.
into it. He's like immediately filled with murderous rage because their culture is being disrespected. So I think that they're just like all about their shit.
But I also think if I showed up in a cemetery in front of an active funeral
Of
and peed on the gravestones, everyone in America would be that level of angry as well. You know what I mean? Like that felt very reasonable levels of anger to
I'm
me.
not saying it's unreasonable. I agree. Wolf was
Right. I just don't think that is like murder cult evidence. I think that is like that specific one is like normal human behavior.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Mark could have not peed on like an ancient
Mark
tree and like deserved to get murdered anyways.
Yeah.
Fuck Mark.
Here's the thing.
We need to talk about the beginning of the movie to set up how big of an asshole everyone is.
Okay, but first I just want to say it is so unbelievably disgustingly annoyingly male to be like, I am in a place that has bathrooms and yet I am going to pee outside in front of everyone. Why not just go to I would be at parties in high school and someone would just like pee in the corner of a backyard and it's like, just go inside and go to the bathroom is right there. Like, why do you need to just walk 5 feet? Why can you not go inside and use the bathroom? It is so male to be like, but I can pee wherever, so I will pee wherever.
And it also just makes me mad because I've tried to use the shiwi and pee standing up, and it's really hard. My body won't do it because it says this is wrong. You should be sitting. The pee won't come out because you're standing up. And so it just makes me pissed off that even with a plastic purple, it's lavender. I have a lavender one. A lavender dick, I can't do it myself. Very annoying, rude. But yeah, also reaction is like, oh, how was I supposed to know is this fucking tree was special? I was like, Mark, I will kill you myself. I'm gonna come into the movie, I'm gonna strangle you to death. But anyway,
Mark, you know that if you peed on funeral flowers or a gravestone, even though they are just dead flowers or just a stone rock, that you would get exactly the same. Like, use your brain, Mark.
fucking say
Mark,
you're
use your
sorry.
brain.
Also, obviously, if they're making a huge fucking deal, it's a huge fucking deal. I don't fucking care if you didn't know. You obviously made a boo-boo baby, so fucking figure your shit out. Say, I'm sorry, Ulf. I'm sorry. Kiss Ulf's feet if you have to. God, I hate him. Anyway. We've talked about 15 different parts of this movie, but let's talk about the beginning.
Okay.
Because the beginning is so starkly different than the rest of the film, as we discussed earlier. It starts out in like literal complete darkness, and right
In
away
winter.
in winter. So not midsummer. I'm sorry. And it starts out with Danny, our main character, played by Florence Pugh, who is a babe, an incredible actress. She's so fucking good at this, in this, and in general.
Just because people are having this discussion with Black Widow having just come out, and hetero straight Marvel comic book dudes discovering Florence Pugh, would just like to further emphasize once again, we are gatekeeping Florence Pugh. I did not start this. I am just carrying on the trend. I've seen this on TikTok. We are gatekeeping Florence Pugh. She's for the girls and the gays. She's for us.
She's for us. Sorry. And we'll just forget about that whole Zach Braff thing. Anyway.
Oh, I am watching Scrubs though, so I'm feeling a little
I
forgiving
really
right
like
now.
him. I really like him a lot, so it doesn't bother me as much as it seems to bother everyone else. But
I
anyway,
like their relationship. I think they're really cute together. Age ain't nothing but a number, baby.
I'm not necessarily gonna come out on the record in support of that relationship, but it's also
That's
not
fine.
my place, you know.
That's fine.
But would I make changes? I'd make changes anyway.
Well, I'll tell you another relationship that I hope that you're not coming out in support of, and that's fucking Christian and Danny. Because right off of the fucking bat, you find out that Danny is a beautiful goddess who is very worried about her tumultuous family life, and she has a piece of crap attached to her body, and it's Christian, and I hate him. From the get-go, I'm like really not down with him because like he kind of immediately gaslights her. Like the
Oh, he gaslights her the entire movie.
The whole movie, yeah. And the first second that he talks to her, he's gaslighting her. Because, like, basically the premise at the very beginning is that Danny's sister was it bipolar disorder? I think they say that. Yeah, she has bipolar disorder, and she's just sent a very alarming email to Danny. And it says, like, I can't do this anymore.
Goodbye.
Like, I'm taking mom and dad or mom and dad are coming to goodbye. And so Danny's freaking out. That's a terrifying thing. And she calls her boyfriend, and he literally is like, oh my God, you let your sister control your life and you make this anxiety for yourself. And like, Danny's like, what the hell? Like, she's sending me alarming things. I'm reacting to that. And he's like, you make this situation for yourself. And then she like believes him and is like, you're right. I am making this worse for myself, and proceeds to call her best friend and be like, I'm pushing him away because I have too many problems. I'm like, girl, no, he's a garbage can.
Okay. So my favorite thing about Christian reminds me so much of my college boyfriend.
No.
I mean, I shit you not. Like, he looks like him. I'm, I'm a blonde girl. He looks just like him. There was one time in college when we were dating that he booked a trip out of the country and like didn't tell me, and then I found out because his friends were talking about it. I didn't get an invite though. Maybe that relationship could have ended differently.
It could have ended with a bear.
Well, but here's the thing. I used to call him Bear. That was my nickname for him.
Oh, Cindy, what the fuck? This is too much.
Have you met Ari Aster, and did you share this information with him?
I did not. Maybe we
heard it through the grapevine in like 2016, and he went, "Ooh, I've got an idea." Yeah, that's what he sounds like.
We broke up in 2015. So like, did he base this off of my life?
Wow. It could be a cat person.
Plagiarism. Oh, good reference, Monica.
Thank you. I read that article.
The new cat person article. Anyway.
But yeah, it's interesting because like in this article I was reading, it was the LA Times article about this movie. It was like mostly an interview with Ari, and he was like, yeah, so
Oh, Ari.
yeah, Ari, we're on a first name basis now. Also, I should say this later, but I just want to say that Ariana Grande also loves this movie and had a Midsummer themed birthday. And there was a trivia point about that on IMDb, and I thought it was fucking hilarious that they
if
went
you
out of their
ask
way to
me.
put that on IMDb.
Yes.
Like it was so important. And I thought about it, and it's Ari, and it just makes a lot of sense, you know?
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, Ari had just gone through like a really terrible breakup. He said there are no parallels between the
Sure.
story and his previous relationship, which like I hope, Jesus fucking Christ. But he basically turned this into he wanted this to mostly be like a breakup movie that had some scary elements to it. It's like mostly like a story about a relationship falling apart. And like if you look at it through that lens, you know, I know like you said, Sydney weren't that scared, and I totally agree. It's not that scary. It's horrifying, but it's not that scary. But like it is like a beautiful like anti-love story, you know, or just
It
like
is
a
a
horrible
really
relationship
good
falling apart.
anti-love story.
Yeah.
And it's like really, as somebody who like kind of went through vaguely similar things, like it's really realistic how they
right?
interact with each other when like the relationship is just like falling apart on both ends.
And they're like
and they
holding
neither of
each-
them will
like,
end
Danny's-
it.
Yeah, and Danny's holding
neither of
on for
them.
like dear life to try to keep it together. Oh
And
God.
he like she's clinging to him because she has nothing left anymore, and he just feels bad because he doesn't want other people to think he's a dick by breaking up with him or breaking up with her right after, you know, her family died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he definitely does some gaslighting. I don't like how he handled this is actually your fault because you are enabling this behavior conversation. I really don't like how he was like, I told you about my trip. You knew about this. That's not weird. Especially because like Sydney, I have a somewhat similar personal experience where a past boyfriend went on or had a business trip planned or something that was on my birthday, and I was like, I'm not mad that you're going to be gone for my birthday, but I'm mad that I found out because your other friend mentioned it in front of me. Like, I just feel like it's one of those things where it's like you go, oh man, I just found out I have a business trip on your birthday, no deal. You just be upfront. You don't have to invite anyone to go with you. You don't have to make it a thing, but you can be like, here's the transparency and the honesty and the openness that this is happening. That said, I do think that Christian is not necessarily like a bad person. I think this is like a bad relationship that neither of them are healthy in. They're both toxic in this relationship in the sense that he doesn't want to abandon her when she needs this amount of support, but also he does not want to provide that level of support. And she knows that he doesn't want to be with her, and that honestly, I don't think she really wants to be with him. I just think she's also at a point where she's like, I can't lose anything else right now. But I also think she called her best friend in the beginning and was like so scared, and the best friend was so supportive. And why didn't the best friend go with them? Why didn't she stay with the best friend?
It would have been
Where was the best friend the rest of the movie? She was so good in that one conversation.
Yeah, she was like, if he's not willing to be there for you, then fucking kick him to the curb.
Yes.
Also, if she had come to Sweden, it really would have improved the ratio, you know, of male to female in that little group. But also, I would say that I'm glad she didn't come because she probably would have been killed, and she's such a baddie. We don't want that for her, you know. But I disagree with you, Chelsea, and I'm sorry I keep disagreeing with you. There you go. That's what I wanted to say.
You're dissing me and you're disagreeing with me.
A bad person because it's not just his relationship with Danny where he does fucked up things. And that's
true. That's true.
The early part too, because he does the exact same thing that he does to Danny gaslighting wise to his entire friend group. Like at the point where Danny's already realized about the trip, like she finds out about it all in front of all of his friends, and then he handles it so terribly where he like says, "I'm sorry," like that, like freaking
Ugh.
SpongeBob, like that SpongeBob
Ugh.
little arms. He's like, "I'm sorry that I made you upset," and she's like,
No,
"I'm
he
just trying to
doesn't even. He goes like, "I'm sorry,"
yeah,
and then he's like, "I apologize." And it's like, was that the apology? Because
yeah,
that sounds more like an "excuse me" than
no,
it sounds like an "I'm sorry."
This made
was
me
so
so
good.
mad.
She said, "You said I'm sorry," and that didn't sound like an apology. It sounded more like too bad. That's what she says, something like that. And I was just like, yes. And then he's like, "Oh, well, sorry, not good enough." Blah blah blah. Tries to leave, and then she like has
Yes,
to whip
that's
it all
true.
around. But
That's
anyway,
true. I did hate that.
the part where he gaslights his friends is like, in order to fix that situation, he invites her on the trip, but he doesn't talk to his friends about it, and he doesn't fucking talk to Pele about it. And I'm like really into respecting people's boundaries with like trip stuff and like family stuff and that sort of thing. So like he invited another person on a trip to Pele's home for like a cultural home festival and didn't ask him first. Didn't ask anyone in the group first and then gaslights them into being okay with it. That's what happens in that other scene. He's like, "Hey, so Danny's gonna like I invited her just so you know, and you guys have to pretend that you already knew, and she's not going to come though, but yeah, she is definitely going to come, and she's here right now. Bye." Literally.
She's not coming. She did buy her ticket. You do have to say how excited you are that she's coming because it was your idea and you've known it all along. That said, blah blah blah. Christian didn't know regardless. So Christian was definitely in the wrong for doing that regardless. But do we think that Pele like planted that seed actually and that it was actually Pele's idea, but he just made Christian think that it was his idea?
Who
Probably.
brought up the trip? Because I feel like at first he didn't want her to come, but then I think he like saw some May Queen energy within her soul, and then he wanted her to come. Because I think
I
he like
don't
liked her, you know?
Yeah, I don't know who brought it up. But there is that scene once they're already there in the Harga community that he's like, "I was most excited for you to come." And obviously we know he is like the mastermind in suggesting that they come to this festival anyway. And so I just have to wonder, like, is there a scene that we didn't see as the viewer, where Pele like subtly planted the idea, he incepted the idea basically in Christian's mind to invite Danny along. Like obviously he didn't have enough of a relationship with her in the beginning to be like, "Oh, my friends are gonna come. Oh, and my friends, invite any buddies that you have," because I mean presumably they are the number 9, you know what I mean? They have
Yeah.
the 9 sacrifices at the end. So, and I went back and checked, and like all of the other people that are hiking in with them, Pele says, are younger people in their summer stage of life, in their summer season of life, ages 18 to 36, who live elsewhere, and I guess presumably bring people back every 90 years. But that's also part of why I think maybe they're killing people more often, if they're like out there and then they come back every year for the Midsommar festival. But anyway, so clearly there was some discussion for who was going to bring somebody and how many people there's planning ahead when it came to just the numbers alone. And so I wonder if he, in the wake of Danny's tragedy, was like, actually she would be a great recruit for our community, May Queen or otherwise, you know what I mean? I think there is very much, he was recruiting her for the community. So I just wonder how involved he was in getting her on board for the trip.
I think he looked at her and he was like, "This woman has strong legs and a great center of balance, and therefore she would be an incredible May Queen."
Blonde hair, blue eyes, needs a new community. Clearly the one she has is a little shitty.
Well, it's fascinating too, because like he tries to relate with her a bunch of times because his family also died. And he says in a fire.
Yeah, he says they burned up in a fire, which is like, that is a horrifying detail you don't need to share if you are trying to calm somebody down. I
Yeah.
personally would not have thrown it in. You know what I mean? I would not be dumping trauma on top of the trauma somebody is already actively in panic over.
Mhm.
But
you know,
is he doing like, did somebody bring him into the community? And so now he was like, your parents died tragically. How about I do what was done to me and now you're a part of this too?
I
yeah.
would say I agree with you, except for he's so fucking Scandinavian. Like, damn.
Well, he could
But
have
he
been
could have been
local. You
from,
know what I
yeah, he
mean?
could have
Yeah,
been a
yeah, yeah.
local.
I think he was, I don't know if they specified. This is just my take. I think that he was young enough that the only memories he has are from being part of the Harga community. And so I don't think that there is like a memory there of his like indoctrination into
Yeah.
it. But I think this is how he's always been taught to think of it and to view it as like this is the community that embraced him and held him and raised him. And he sees somebody else who has lost much of their community. Obviously she has this off-screen best friend, but clearly she relies on Christian primarily for emotional support, whether that's because of habit this far into their 4-year relationship, or if because historically he had been better at providing support and he's just not good at it now that he's like emotionally checked
Yeah.
out of the relationship, or whatever the deal is. But he sees that the primary person she has left to her that's active in her life is this shitty dude. Like maybe her best
Yeah.
friend lives back in Minnesota or something, which is where
Yeah.
her parents are from. Like maybe they're not, maybe they're like a long distance friendship, like I have with one other person here on this podcast. Luckily one of the other ones is local. But you know what I mean? Who knows why the best friend could not be more involved, but I think he just like sees his situation mirrored, and he also sees her lovely Aryan features, and
Yeah, that
perhaps
has
her
gotta
low
be a part
center
of
of
it then.
gravity. But yeah,
The
she
low center of
definitely is
gravity is huge.
blonde and blue-eyed, so you know
Fits
that
right in.
plays a role.
Well, okay, so this is we have to talk about it. The horrifyingness of it all, which is the scene where we find out what happens to Danny's entire family. And I just want to say
Oh,
that, like, cinematically, it was like so freaking well done. Like, you heard our opening quote. If you're listening to the pod, you heard our opening quote. So you heard this part, where like Christian is in the middle of like shit talking Danny, and Mark is saying all this horrible shit about her and how he should just dump her because she's abusive for calling him all the time. I
right.
hate Mark so much. I
I
have so much to say
hate
about Mark.
Mark.
I have so much to say about Mark, but I'm gonna wait until we talk about this part. But he gets up, answers the phone, and this is just like, the perfect, I don't know, just he answers the phone. He's like, "Hey, babe, what's up?" And Danny's just wailing, making this like horrible, horrible, horrible noise. And it goes from that horrible wailing and her saying, "No, no, 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 no," to this like high pitched music sound that's like, "Nyeh," or something like that. And then it cuts, like right when that music cuts, it cuts to the house where Danny's family lived. Earlier in the movie, you had seen Danny calling and leaving them a voicemail, and it shows them asleep in their bed, the parents asleep in their bed as the voicemail played. And I checked, they're breathing in that part, so they're still alive then. I thought, oh fuck, were they dead that at that point too? And I didn't pick up on that. But they start with the scene starts with the firefighters going into the garage and turning off the car, and basically both cars have pipes connected to the exhaust, and they lead up into the house, and is put under the door jamb of the parents' bedroom and taped in there, and the other one is taped into the sister's mouth. Oh god, that's just a really horrifying reveal. But when I was
Very
reading,
just mainlined it.
oh Jesus, yeah, and it's so disturbing, and her eyes are like
Oh,
glazed
her
over.
eyes
They're
are
like
so
open, yeah.
They're
yeah.
wide open, and it looks like she's got like cataracts all of a
One's
sudden.
white and one's like
That's
blood red.
and there's just so graphic, trigger warning, I don't know, vomit all down the front of her too, which is a really fun ad there. Ari really knows how to fuck you up.
He did his research.
He did his research, but I was confused because I read quite a few articles about this movie online today. Online, am I an ancient being? Anyway, and on the interwebs, and a lot of them were saying that like the words that they were using to describe how the parents died was that it was like an axe, like that it was just like she was killing herself, and then because of that it somehow killed them. And I was like, no, she killed them like on purpose. There was all of this like passive language, and I was just like, no, it's entirely intentional that she took them with her. Like she wrote that in the
She
email.
duct taped the bottom of their door so that the carbon monoxide would not seep out underneath the door. Yeah, certainly extremely intentional.
And I was
Yeah,
like,
she
how
did
are
that
there
shit on
three
purpose.
different articles that are misinterpreting this so blatantly? I was just like, come on, guys. I know we don't want to believe it. It's horrible, but it happened. But yeah, it's just really like horrifying, but so beautifully shot. The way that it's done is just like the reveal is really, really, really incredible. And there's a lot of like really great transitions in this movie as well. Like I can't remember exactly what the scene is, but there's a part where Danny like walks into a room and then like puts
She
her
goes-
foot down
Yeah.
and she's suddenly on the plane.
She goes into the bathroom to cry.
After
Yes,
Pele is like
Pele.
specifically being like trauma, trauma, and trauma. Remember how your parents died horrifically? He's like trying to give her sympathy, but that's his first instance of almost like triggering that trauma in there so that he could be the one to comfort her.
He
But
doesn't really say anything that bad in that instance though, because he just said, "Oh, by the way, I just wanted to let you know that I'm so sorry to hear about your family." And then she's like, and that's all it takes sometimes is someone who's experienced grief.
Right.
Yeah.
It did to me, maybe this is just because I don't have that direct experience. It did seem a little drawn out what he was saying, not harmful, not malicious, could certainly have been normal, but knowing the rest of the course of this movie, having watched it for a second time with the lens of knowing exactly what the deal is and not necessarily just automatically being like Danny is our protagonist, so however she feels is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They say that when you first watch the movie, you might get the like good for her impression, and that's because you are in your own way being like indoctrinated into the cult alongside her because you're following her journey. And then once you watch it for a second time, obviously you know where it's going and you are more able to like pick out the nuances of when she's being steered in one direction or another.
Yeah.
But I think the whole film, again, not scary, but it is horrifying, but I think it's like a really gorgeous piece of art.
Agreed.
And I think that's one thing that is really, really interesting. All of the cinematography is so beautiful, but that scene in particular, I think is really evocative of one thing that they do where Pele's like main pitch to her when they're in the Harga community is like, when is the last time you felt held? Like, when is the last time you felt embraced? And this is like a cult of radical empathy in a way. And they don't let you experience that grief alongside Danny, other than that one moment in the beginning with the whale and her like being held by Christian in his lap. Other than that one moment, every time she starts to get really emotional, it cuts away. So it's like she goes to cry in the bathroom and then it cuts to her freaking out and composing herself in the plain bathroom. And then when she is high, she like goes away to compose herself and then it like cuts to the next day. And then there's a moment when they're in the community where she walks away and she's overwhelmed and then it like cuts away. Like they don't even let the audience sit in that grief and like just hold on to that moment until you are doing it alongside Danny in that scene where she's screaming and all of the women start screaming with her. Like they make you wait for it and it's so effective.
It's so effective. And I was just reading this article about Florence Pugh where she spoke about that moment acting wise when all the women were wailing together in that way, and she said that it was like one of the most incredible acting moments of her life, and that, you know, the scene was, the way they shot it was way longer than what's in the film. And then even when it was over, they all just like hysterically cried together for like an hour afterwards. And I was just like, I mean, it shows it's just such a incredible moment. Wow. Oh, that's the thing that makes me love this movie so much. It's like the whole experience of it, like just as a movie, not necessarily a horror movie. It's just like groundbreaking, as they say.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think a really strong piece of cinema, whether or not you like it as a horror movie.
Yeah.
I hated all of the communal wailing together. If like
Sure.
if I was crying and other people started mimicking my noises, I would have hit all of them. I would have immediately would have gotten mad and I would have been like, square up, bitch. Like we're fighting. Like how dare you try to empathize with me right now when I do not like I hated it. I hated it when all the women were like doing the weird sex moaning all together. Like I hated it.
So maybe you would not have been indoctrinated into the cult after all.
Wouldn't have worked.
They
for
would
you.
not have picked
You've
you
got the
to,
look, but
to
not the
join
vibe.
crew.
Look, but not the vibe.
Got
Like,
the look, but not the vibe.
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
it-
I think
like,
there's a certain vulnerability that existed within Danny that they exploited that would not exist in every single person who is grieving, but specifically existed in her who didn't have a strong support system otherwise, because she was specifically relying on somebody who refused to
Sucks.
be there for her and also refused to remove himself from the situation so that she would find someone else to be there for her.
And refused to remember her birthday.
oh, listen, we're
Just on top
gonna.
of everything else. Oh,
It's like the Aly and AJ song.
My,
My
stupid
stupid
birthday.
birthday.
My stupid birthday.
what kind of a boyfriend who would forget
Get
that?
that.
Who would forget that? You know, the type of guy who doesn't see what he has until she leaves. Okay, I won't do the whole
Don't
song.
let me go.
Yeah.
But okay, besides the Aly and AJ of it all, I want to talk about the drugs in this movie because
Okay.
oh my god. As someone who's has friends who've done shrooms, a couple of friends who have done them, and so I've heard from them about what it's like. This is a very accurate
This is
depiction. This is the
so
most
accurate.
accurate depiction I've ever seen of a drug of a mushroom trip, or I'm assuming it's shrooms. No, it is shrooms.
Well, the first
Yeah, 'cause
one
they make
is
the tea.
the first one is shrooms. The second one, like the tea they make, is kind of like unspecified. They never say it's like mushrooms,
Yeah.
but
It's like
immediately
it looks
as
like
soon,
flower petals that they're
Yeah.
muddling. I was like,
but it's like as soon as they get to like vaguely where they're going, they're like immediately have some mushrooms, and then everybody and Danny's like, I don't know, I just got here, like I want to kind of get my footing, and she gets peer pressured by all of the shitty people to do one. Psychedelics are maybe not the greatest thing to do when you're grieving.
I was gonna say, I wrote in my notes,
No.
like maybe microdose if you're trying to
Yeah.
do something. You know what I mean? Like maybe just do a little microdosing and then like
totally.
work your way up to like a full shrooms trip.
She already knows that she's the odd one out, though. Like everybody is already treating her that way. She gets the vibe that they didn't actually want her to come and wanted it to be a boys' trip because they're not good at hiding it. Like fucking Josh was like such a douche about the whole thing, even though I kind of like Josh, but that's just because I like that actor. But like obviously Mark, what made the least subtle he's like, hey, Christian, do you want to look at something on my paper right now in the bedroom? And I don't know if you guys noticed this when he like finds out that Danny's coming on the trip. That's what I'm talking about. He like goes to walk to the bedroom to have that conversation with Christian, and he almost forgets to bring his laptop. Like he picks up, he like leaves his laptop on the chair, and then he's like, and then he picks it up. Like obviously you need that if it's gonna about the essay, honey, you fucking idiot. And I guess I can say this now because it's gonna come up. Mark is Sid from Toy Story.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's the exact same. It's
Oh, yeah.
insane. It's
Well,
insane. They have
I
the
saw
same
somewhere
face.
The eyebrows.
I saw somewhere that the
Yeah.
actor, whoever plays Mark, was like going to like was in like the running to play Pennywise the Clown in the new It movies.
His name is Will Poulter. I'm glad that it's not him because his face makes me mad, and not in the same way that it's a Skarsgård, right? Who
Bill.
Yeah.
Billy, good old Billy. Billy's got a scary face, also hot, but then you look in
He
those
look-
big old eyes, and you're
He
like,
looks
shit.
like a sexy fish a little bit.
Ooh, yeah. Totally. Well, this fucking guy has got the most easily hateable face I've ever seen. And I'm sorry, Will. I'm sorry. But you probably are using that to your advantage to get roles. So it's not all bad.
We're sure you're lovely in person.
But
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate. He looks exactly like a childhood villain that everyone our age grew up with. You know what I mean? Like, that's unavoidable.
exactly. Like, was he did they see him as a child and then create that whatever CGI image from him? I would do research on that to find out.
He's our age, so he probably was a little young to be the actual basis for Sid
Toy Story
back when Toy Story, probably like 1994, 1996.
Yeah, so we
1995. Ooh, right in the middle. But he could have been the inspiration for adult Sid in Toy Story 3. You know what I mean? Like, he was
I forgot about
not
that.
quite old enough to be the same age as adult Sid in Toy Story 3, but well, maybe. I think Sid was a little bit older than Andy. Not to get too far into the Toy Story
We're
lore.
gonna go. This is actually
but
now
Andy is,
a Toy Story.
Yeah, this is a Toy Story podcast now. Last week it was Degrassi. This week it's Toy Story. Andy is going off to college. He's about to be a freshman, and
my God.
Sid is an adult who's working, so presumably a little older. You know what I mean? But he's working as a sanitation worker, so who knows? He could also be 18, which would be roughly how old Will Poulter was at the time.
It could work. It just makes sense.
But
time isn't
probably
real, and so it doesn't matter either way.
Yes, time is a flat circle, as we like to say.
The reason that I bring up Mark right now and shit talking him is because this is the only like good thing that he does in this entire movie, and it's not even a good thing. But he really brings the shroom scene together because like the things that he fucking says are exactly what you say. They're like, when he finds out it's daytime, he's like, that's wrong. That's not okay. That is not okay. And then
why is the sky blue?
He's like, it's not.
I don't want new people right now. Like, love him.
No,
absolutely a vibe. Absolutely a mood.
But the most shroomy thing about it is when he lays, he's like, okay, well, I'm going to lay down right now. Then he lays down and he's like, this is incredible. This feels so incredible. He's like, you guys all lay down too. Everybody else. Josh, lay down right now.
Josh, can you please lay down?
I was like, oh my God.
Like, asked him, he's like, I really need you to do this.
Josh, I need you to lay down. And like, that's what it's like. You're just like, I'm feeling this sensation.
Allegedly.
Everything about a shroom, allegedly, that I heard from my friends. Like, the feelings that a person that has experienced this, that's not me, feels is completely singular. Like your trip, their trip, this person's trip is completely a singular event, but you really want to like have a shared experience with the people around you, but everyone's fucking feeling it in their own fucking way. And it's so obvious.
That is one thing that I loved, that Mark was like, no, we have to all take this at the same time. So we have a shared trip. It's not going to be a shared trip if you take it in 20 minutes from now. But also she drank it as tea anyway, which I feel like ingesting it differently would give you a different experience. But also either way, he was not having the same trip as everybody else because he was just losing his shit. Poor guy.
But taking it at the same time, I hear, is very important because otherwise, if you come up, some people come up at different times, then it's very alarming. And that's all I have to say about Friend's experience with
that.
Steven.
Is so nice of your friend to share that.
Yeah, my friend told me a lot about it. Anyway.
But also he's terrified of getting ticks, and I think that is very funny. And then Josh also says, both my grandparents died from ticks, had to give them a closed casket funeral, which is just so funny that he is roasting Mark because Mark absolutely deserves it for being a piece of shit, but also he's so funny. I love him a little bit.
So I mean, I'm glad he was there to like add in that little bit of comedic energy that we needed, you know, because otherwise it just would have been like a fight fest the entire time. Besides like the Danny and Christian anger, there's also the Josh and Christian anger because Christian, again, another example of him being an absolute piece of shit partner and friend. He has no original thoughts in his stupid little bitch brain. Sorry, I hate him so much. And I've watched this 3 times now, and it's
My
not
God.
changed my perspective. He's like, oh, I'm just going to do the exact thesis as Josh that he's already stated 15 times in the movie that he's going to do. And he's just like, I'm just telling you I'm going to do this and I'm not asking. He's such a douchebag. Oh my God.
I do think they could have identified 2 different entry points to both talking about Harga. Like there's so much going on there that they both could have done their thesis on Harga in different senses. But Christian was absolutely being a bitch about it, being like, I'm just letting you know you are also going to go to Germany and England and look at their midsummer festivals. So, like, it's different. You're doing midsummer and I'm doing Harga specifically. Josh was like, no, you know that I picked Harga. Like, it was Josh's whole, Josh's thesis was the reason they were going in general.
That's the whole reason.
Like,
oh, and I also just
Anyway.
love Josh's call out of Christian. This is the quote. He said, okay, do you think I don't know what you're doing? It's actually kind of outrageously unsubtle. The fact that you're being this bold about it, I'm honestly kind of impressed. And Christian's like, what the fuck? What does that mean? Christian, you means you little bitch. He gaslights you and then he turns around and he's like, oh, what? It's me, a little blue-eyed baby. Shut the fuck up. I hate him.
I do have a little sympathy for Christian. I think because this is my second viewing, in the sense that the first time, the whole time, I was just like, fuck Christian sucks. And then obviously, when you really think about what happens to him at the end, it is a disproportionate punishment to any of his actions, obviously, because it's murder. But even just like the specifics of it, and he's like, you know what I mean? Like, he's drugged. He is not able to consent to you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where in hindsight, I feel so bad for Christian at the end that it gives me more sympathy for Christian at every other point in the movie. Where it's like, I don't know that I think that he's a bad person, but he certainly is a dick.
I think he's a bad person, but I do think he was still like low key. It's hard to say. Was he raped? Not precisely, but also
yes. I say yes.
I would.
Yeah. It's just like when I first watched it, I was like, fuck you. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, because you're like, he's going to go fuck this girl. His girlfriend's right there.
Yeah.
And then
like,
it's like,
blah, blah. But like that isn't in he doesn't get to decide at all.
Yeah.
Like it's planned. Like the redhead, whatever her name may be, chooses him.
Maya
puts her blood and her pubes in his meat pie and her blood in the juice, which I didn't notice the first watch. His juice is red. Everybody else's juice is yellow. So he's drinking period blood cola. But
lady
that
juice.
happens. He has that lady juice. Yum. Ooh, I like that.
Oh, no, thank you.
Also, what's the main lady's name? Siv, I think.
Siv or Svin or something like that.
S-I-V is how it's spelled. Like calls him to her office, which has really cool wallpaper, I will say. And is
including
like, yes,
a burning bear.
Mm-hmm. You've been selected. Like, congratulations, you've been selected to fuck this girl. Like, cool. And he's just like, what the fuck?
And he's tripping the entire time.
Yeah.
They specifically offer him the tea when he's watching Danny do her little May Queen festival dance off. And he says, no, I don't want to have a bad trip. Like, no, thank you. And then she goes like, no, it's fine. Drink it. Like, he didn't even want to take the drugs in the first place, but they pressure him into taking the drugs. And then at that point, whether or not he would have consented is off the table. The fact that he is capable of participating in the act does not mean that he is capable of giving consent. He can't, and therefore he doesn't. And I think arguably, even though we see him like walk himself into the room, you know what I mean? He was absolutely did not have any ability to
grasp the
Be
actual
having thoughts.
situation.
You know what I mean? Like
Totally.
he didn't even follow Maya up when she went up right away. You know what I mean? He sat there waiting high as fuck until they like sprinkled the little flowers all the way up to him and then basically like led him by the hand
Yeah.
into the cabin.
And
So
then once he's in there, you know, and the deed is being done, there's even a lady pushing his butt. Like that's
yeah.
it's not the best. And like, can you imagine just in any scenario, the drug parts of this aside, like I think that was the redhead's mom who was caressing his face as they were having sex. I think I got a mom vibe from her. I don't know, why was it only her that came up? Very upsetting. Just upsetting in
Interesting.
general to have an audience at all. Also, this leads me to one other thing that I just want to ask you guys about, because I've watched this movie 3.5 times now, actually. Because one time I watched it, half of it with James, and then he had to leave. And I was like, how could you just leave? He had to
How
leave
could you
right
leave?
after the cliff diving.
Oh my god. It is
So
a
he just-
long ass movie though.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So
We were like, oh,
long.
we'll watch it. And then he was like, well, I
And then
have
he was
to
like,
go
wait, 3
somewhere.
hours? I don't have the time. Yeah.
It's 2 hours and 27 minutes, but yeah.
excuse me.
But that said, was there ever a part really that tells you what's going on with the Oracle? You
With
know?
the Oh,
How there's that
Ruben?
person who's that has like a lot of facial
The
deformity.
inbred one.
Ruben.
Yes,
Yeah.
that they purposely inbreed
Yes.
to
I have no
create.
idea
What did they do?
what anything about him.
Did
like-
he choose Christian? Like, I don't know what he did. He was there in the room watching them all screw, which was very upsetting to see. And then he was also there sleeping in the room when Josh got bonked to death. And then he's sitting drawing at 2 different points. He paints some stuff.
Yeah,
What else
I
does
mean,
he do?
I think Ruben primarily just exists to be the oracle. You know what I mean?
But what is the oracle?
But what is the
What does he
oracle?
prophesize?
Nothing specific, but Ruben, the elder, explains to Josh when they're looking at the Ruby Raider in the like sacred temple where the Ruby Raider is kept, that they specifically participate in incest in order to have someone who, I think he says, like, his mind is not clouded by normal cognition. So that's their goal, is to have someone whose mind is not clouded by normal cognition, presumably so that they can be receptive to whatever teachings from the gods or ancients or spirits or whatever their system of belief is. And then Ruben draws and writes and paints and otherwise creatively expresses themselves in the Ruby Raider, and then the elders interpret that. So that's this system of belief, is that like information comes down from wherever through Ruben, because Ruben's brain is not clouded by normal cognition, and then that information is then interpreted by the elders of the community who have the ability to interpret it into a way that makes sense for their community.
I've missed that every time I've watched this movie. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I will say some bones that I have to pick with this match between Maya and Christian is I think Maya just independently, they show in the beginning when they first arrive at Harga, Connie and Simon and Ingmar are like walking, and they walk by this tapestry that basically lays out the plan of how the woman makes the man fall in love with her by putting little plants under his bed and then a pube in his food and her menstrual blood in his drink, and then they fall in love and make a baby. And so I think she just like saw Christian and presumably, in my opinion, because he's got a hint of ginge in his hair, was like, that's the one. Because she's trying to continue the redhead bloodline.
No,
but
here's
when
the
he's
thing,
in the sun that you see it.
Punnett square-wise, it's very crucial that he's a redhead.
Right. But Civ also says that he is like an ideal astrological match. And so I also would love to know how much of his chart they have access to and what they've reviewed. I would love to just know more. You know what I mean? Like what goes into making him a great astrological match. But my point of clarification is Pele says she just got her pants license the year before, which means she's allowed to fuck now. Good for her. Did she save some menstrual blood in preparation for the newcomers, for the new blood coming to the Midsommar Festival, just in case she found somebody that she liked? Because if she was actively on her period in the beginning when she uses it, then she's not going to be able to get pregnant very easily because she won't be ovulating for like another 2 weeks.
Babe, these girls, they don't play around. Of course they have vials of their menstrual blood. Of course.
I think probably that is
Look at
right
the
and
rest
true.
of
Oh, yeah.
We don't see her
everything.
menstruating, you know what I mean? I do wonder if there was a scene in the director's cut. They cut out like 30 minutes in the director's cut so that it would only be rated R instead of NC-17. I don't know. I haven't investigated further like what got cut, but I certainly could imagine that more direct references to her menstrual blood could have been in part of the director's cut, and then they were like, let's get that off screen for sexism reasons, presumably.
I was hoping that the 30 minutes that they cut is all just them skinning Mark.
It's that, I mean,
Just
could be 29 minutes and 1 minute of
skinning Mark.
periods. You know what I mean? Who knows?
And like, I want to see what happens to Connie.
Connie, yeah.
yeah,
I was reading in the
We do-
trivia that they think that she's drowned because she's like bloaty. Gross. I'm so sorry. Her body is all bloaty when they bring her to the temple, which is a lovely shade of yellow, by the way.
It is a good shade of yellow.
Yeah,
Very
apparently-
happy.
Very happy. Apparently in part of the cutout scenes, a little boy is almost drowned as a sacrifice or something. And
That's
so,
why I think maybe also they do more murders.
yeah, I think they show the murders more for sure. And I wish that there'd been
No.
more
I
of
mean,
that.
like,
No, I
in
know what you're
addition to
saying.
this one every 90 years.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But I want to.
You're like,
see
I
him.
still don't agree.
I still don't agree.
Fair
with
enough.
you.
I still diss you and I disagree with you. Fair enough. Fair
I
enough.
love you, but I'm sorry. But I will say that, like, imagine like the last moment of your whole life, you've just got brained, and you look up and you see a man wearing your friend who sucks, but he's still your friend, his face on their face. That's a horrible thing for your last sight. Poor Josh. And he was an asshole too and obnoxious, but like, you know, it's still
Nobody
sad
wants
to see.
nobody wants a stranger wearing your friend's face to
No.
hit you in the head and die. Nobody wants that.
Well,
No.
someone off screen actually hits him in the head and he dies while he's looking at who he
Oh,
thinks
yeah.
is Mark and is slowly realizing.
Ah.
And Ari Aster apparently said in an interview maybe or in director's commentary, I don't know, I just know this from IMDb, but apparently Ari Aster said that it was Pele who hits him, which I have a bone to pick with and I have follow-up thoughts with, because to me, and I'm sorry, I'm skipping back to the end here, and so if you'd like me to delay this conversation, I will, but I don't want to forget. So I'm going to charge ahead now since neither of you are jumping in to stop me.
Go for it, girl.
Thank you. At the end, there are the 9 sacrifices, and they say there are 4 new blood sacrifices and then 4 of ours. Presumably, the first 2 are the elders that we saw in the beginning. Although when we see the bodies in the temple, their heads look intact, and so I have questions.
No, so it's like they made a representation of them because they get burned in a pyre and turned into ashes, and the ashes are put in the ritual tree. But they like made like statues of them because they still sacrifice themselves as part of this ritual, just like a couple days earlier.
Thank you. That helps me. But then the other 2,
I know Mark is a scarecrow. I think like
Mark is wearing like a little jester's hat.
He's the fool.
He's the fool, but I think his body's like stuffed with straw, and then like one of the bodies has like
they skinned him.
Yeah, and then one of the bodies has like fruit and stuff. So like I'm not sure if it's like
Simon's body has the flowers in the eyes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there are the 2 elders that are 2 of the 4 from the Harga community, and then there are 2 other volunteers, and it's Ingmar and Ulf. Yes, and Ingmar is the one who brought in Simon and Connie, obviously specifically to kill them in this ceremony, which fair enough, because not fair enough, not fair enough. To be clear, because Ingmar is like, oh yes, Connie and I were dating, and then Simon stole her away. So I see why he was like, you are the two I will murder. But also not fair enough, because Connie was like, it was one date and I didn't even know it was a date. So leave her alone. But what I'm saying is he's the one that brought people to be sacrificed. And then Ulf is the one who was wearing Mark's face, who presumably killed Mark.
Yeah.
And also went to attack Josh. And so for them to be the ones who were really actively perpetuating the violence and then the ones to sacrifice themselves made sense to me. That everybody else gets to do murder and then is hands off is strange to me. Like I felt like those two volunteered themselves because they had been the perpetrators or had been more hands-on violent in a way than others in the community. And so it was maybe it was just those two because they were characters that we knew more than other random characters in the community who were just like extras, you know. But it felt to me purposeful that they were the two who volunteered. And then for Pele to be bludgeoning somebody to death and then be like, anyway, deuces, back to my life. It felt like it felt like they were doing something with those two being the volunteers, and then they kind of like undercut
there are
it a little
only
bit.
two. You can only have two volunteers. That's just how the ceremony works.
And Pele had to be there to make a baby with Danny later on. What?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The other two guys, the other older people were gonna die no matter what because they're
Right.
72. No ifs, ands, or buts. They gotta go. And it makes sense to me that Ingmar and Ulf are the two that volunteer because obviously they're extra devoted to the cult and the culture and all of it because they're willing to carry out these heinous acts in order to like preserve the tradition and protect their community.
Okay.
So they're like willing to put in the work and they're willing to die for it. So I think that like just thematically goes hand in hand. So I wasn't surprised that it was them because they're obviously super devoted. Though I was sad because I like Ingmar. I'm sad because I like saying both of their names. But I guess I'm happy because I have more opportunities to say their names now because they're important to the plot.
I think that is a very powerful and successful reframing of the narrative that I hadn't considered. That resonates with me.
Thank you. Oh my God.
We have to get to our segments soon, but before we do that, I just have a few more things that I want to bring up. One of them is really small and fast, and I wish I had mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the treatment of Christian at the end once he's drugged. But I also have to call out specifically the clap, which I think is like so horrible and scary and mean and upsetting when Christian is like high at the dinner table and then he turns to the old man beside him to be like, what's going on? And the old man claps really hard in his face and he's just like, why would you do that? Like, it's so mean. So mean.
That part is so funny.
It's so,
and
his little baby face, he's like, so wounded. It does make my heart hurt for him. It's so sad.
Poor Christian.
Poor Christian, just
Poor
in like
Christian.
that end scene. You know what I mean? Not poor Christian the rest of the movie, just poor Christian at that point where he is also freaking out on a drug trip. I'm so vulnerable. And then the clap in his face, you know what I mean? Obviously everything else
Just
morally
terrible.
is worse, but his expression in that moment breaks my heart.
Also, just Christian gets it so bad,
Yes.
because like he goes from that scene with all of the naked ladies singing in harmony and runs out completely nude into the community, which
out.
I really liked reading this IMDb.
Like,
oh yeah, his dick is out. We get to see our second on-screen
like-
dick, y'all. This is huge.
like,
The representation.
even like a little bit of like
it wasn't that huge.
not huge, but it was like
huge for us.
swinging a little bit when he was like, so it was like there was because normally with like dicks it'll just be like they're not moving
Glimpse.
and
Yeah.
like you don't get to like see it in action, but like this shit was moving.
Yeah,
This
and
is
I
a dick
liked
in
also
action.
the A dick in action. The actor, what's his name?
Jack.
I don't know, but I
Jack?
do know
Jack
what
Rayner.
IMDb you're going to talk about.
Yeah. So he advocated to be completely nude for that scene when he runs out into the world to escape all of the nudie ladies. Because and like what he's saying, but like I just have a bad taste in my mouth from his character, and it's not his fault. But he was just like, so many women get humiliated like this in horror movies, so I wanted a man to be humiliated like this too. Blah 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 blah. And I don't know. I'm glad that he did that. I'm glad that it happened. We got to see his dick, and it was a moving scene, and it really adds like insult to injury.
Mhm.
But at the same time, just like him making a point of saying like I wanted to be like the women in the Last House on the Left. I was like, okay, don't compare it to the Last House on the Left, because talk about the worst rape scene I've ever seen in my fucking life. And I think I did at the Hills Have Eyes episode. So obviously, it really fucked me up.
Yeah, I
was
will.
just like this.
I will say I don't think that is a great comparison, because The Last House on the Left is just such a fucked up movie. But I do
So fucked.
think that it is a good artistic choice to mirror the
Agreed.
naked, totally vulnerable, literally nothing to cover or protect you moment in that just the total vulnerability. Also, because I think a lot of people do see him like participating in the sex ritual, you know what I mean, and don't consider his complete inability to consent. People talk about male sexual assault so differently, and a lot of people don't appreciate it, that it's like just as damaging, you know what I mean. And also some people think like if a guy is capable of having sex, he must be capable of consenting to having sex, and that's just not the case. And so I think it does do some good heavy lifting in this movie to remind you that he is going through like a terrifying traumatic event, and not just that he cheated on his girlfriend or whatever, which I think is the first impression for a lot of people when you're first seeing that scene. Like it's not until he freaks out that you really appreciate what's happening.
And how fucked up he was, and all of that.
And so I think that moment does a lot of heavy lifting. And also I think coming off of Friday the 13th, where we were like, yay, a horror anthology that finally participates in male nudity the same way it participates in female nudity. I was just like, I'm glad we have this through line, a clear reference.
We got Kevin Bacon's ass, and now Jack Rayner's dick.
Yes.
Good for us.
Yes.
But I don't know if like the next series of events kind of like distracts from the trauma of the sexual events that had just happened, but like it definitely certainly adds to the overall trauma, because he's naked, he's running around, he's scared, he's trying to hide. The place he chooses to hide is the place where Simon's body is like what's like, it called? Viking eagle?
Blood eagle.
The blood eagle. Oh my god. That I forgot that it's his lungs and he's still alive, kind of, because he's like pinned up, he's got his eyes gouged out and flowers put in instead, which is a little cute, but like when you think about the reality of it, not so cute.
I think there's some room for debate on that on TV trivia, which is to medically speaking, to be in such a position, you would probably have been like taking your dying, gasping breaths in that moment, just because your diaphragm is what makes your lungs work, I guess. And if your lungs are outside of your body, your diaphragm cannot be making them work. So, and we know that Simon disappeared much earlier in the movie, like several days before. So the other argument is that, like, we see the flowers breathing on Danny's headdress, and we see nature like pulsating around her. It could be Christian's skewed perspective from being high makes it look like Simon's body is breathing the same way that it looks like the flowers are breathing. But I just want to point out that he also sees Joss's little leg planted in the garden with a rune drawn on the foot. So it's a double whammy.
Yep. It's a double whammy. He's like, oh, all of my friends are dead.
Yes.
He doesn't even need to see that Mark's dead, because he's like, of course Mark's dead.
Of course Mark's dead.
Of course Mark's fucking dead. He's like, you ever met that guy? You want to kill him immediately. It just is clear. But something else, like just thematically, really quickly, I love the subtle and not so subtle ways that they bring back Danny's like grief trauma throughout, especially while she's on drugs. Like the first time when they're shrooming, she makes a classic cardinal mistake where you fucking look in the mirror when you're on shroom, or someone looks in the mirror when you're there, they are on shrooms, and you shouldn't do that. No one should do that. But then instead of just seeing her face look fucked up, she also sees the scary, barfy carbon monoxide death face of her sister. Terrible. And then
And Terry looks right into the camera in that moment, right into it.
right into the camera. Oh, it's Terry. That's her name. Sorry, I've forgotten that this entire podcast. And then also, right after she becomes the May Queen, after Danny becomes the May Queen, and everyone swarms around her, and she's super overwhelmed because she's on drugs and she's been dancing for I don't know how many hours. Could be a whole day. The day is always, so there's no way to tell. Then her mom like walks by in front of her, and she's like, "Mom, mom," and then right then they lift her up onto this platform, and like everyone surrounds her and they do this like beautifully shot procession. And something I didn't notice until the IMDb trivia is that in the trees behind her is like this like superimposed image of the death face of Terry, her sister, as well, which like maybe is a little much, the little heavy-handed weird that they did that, but also I liked it a little bit too, and I never would have noticed it unless it was pointed out to me.
Yeah, you
So
sent that screenshot to our group chat, and I was like, "Oh, there's a face in the trees," but you didn't say specifically what you were talking about. You were just like, "There's an Easter egg in this image," and I was like, "Oh, what? I wonder if that's right." And it was only once I read the trivia later that I was like, "Oh, I was right," but I wouldn't have been able to be like, "That's Terry's face." I was just like, "Huh, I guess it looks kind of like a face."
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the things in this movie, like you can't really notice like all of the things that they put into it until you are at home and you can pause. Cause like even the opening second of the fucking movie, there's like this beautiful tapestry type thing that has the really fucked up looking sun. You know
Yeah.
the sun I'm talking about, who's like that tapestry has the entire plot of the movie on
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and you can't you see that, but you don't get enough seconds with it
Look
to
at
really
it.
take a look at that. And even the menstruation tapestry goes by pretty quickly, but that one's at least a little bit slower, so you have to know. All the wallpaper, you don't get a chance to like notice that in Civ's little house. You don't get a chance to notice that unless you can pause.
It's a very creatively rich film. It's jam-packed.
Jam-packed. It really is. But so do we want to talk about the very, very end? I know, Chelsea, you had some thoughts you wanted to bring up about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts about the timeline just because they stress so specifically that it's 9 days, and yet we only see 5 days. And so if such the case, I would love to know what celebrations they have in store for the following 4 days. Just out of curiosity, you know what I mean? But it's like day 0, they arrive in Sweden and then they do the shrooms. And then day 1, they like wake up and walk into the village. Day 2 is the feast and the Atastupa, the cliff diving. Day 3, eyebrows, Mark pees on the tree and Connie and Simon disappear / are killed. Day 4, Mark and Josh have been killed like during the night when they wake up on day 4. And then Danny,
they don't last long, do they?
And then Danny is crowned the May Queen and Christian is drugged in the sex ritual. And then arguably it is the next day, day 5, when he's put inside of the bear and we see her on stage absolutely covered in flowers. But even so, that is 5 days out of 9. And so it just begs the question, because each day they specifically are like yesterday, blah, blah, blah. So like there's no missing days that are just like not accounted for on screen. Leads me to imply that they do the blood sacrifice halfway through and then they truly party for 4 more days. Would love to see that movie. Let's get a sequel just 4 days. Maybe at the end of it, Danny realizes that she has been indoctrinated into really truly horrifying cult that killed all of her friends question marks, quotation marks. But regardless, questions
Chelsea.
about the timeline. Which
Chelsea, the next 4 days are the reason the movie was NC-17, because it's just an orgy the whole time. And so they took out all of the sex orgy parts except for the one, that we
You
need
can
to
only have
see,
one orgy
in
per
order to get
movie.
it into theaters. Yeah.
Just
But there
think,
was just 4 more orgies
yeah,
and elaborate dinners. That's another just really small. All of the dinner parts where they like perfectly like stand up or sit down like right one after another. Beautiful. I would love to have
gorgeous.
that sync with
Yeah.
anyone or anything.
I do think that's interesting and worthy of mentioning just because there are so many other Easter eggs in this movie. Like everything is put together so intentionally. Um, and so I just think it's like strange that they would just be like, anyway, here are 5 days out of a 9-day ritual. You only see 5. I guess we're supposed to assume that it is the 9th day though, and somehow we've lost time. I don't really know how because
I
I
I
don't
feel like the
know.
rest of it is like celebration because the other
Maybe.
4 days are pretty jam packed with heavy stuff. You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean? Like they
mean,
have to watch their friends die, and then their other friends die, and then some other friends die, and they have to do some murdering. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of just legwork.
yeah,
They got to do an orgy. They all got to get naked and watch a little girl fuck someone. It's a lot to do,
I
and then they
just
just get to relax
I would
for the
I
next.
would love to know if this really is just the 5th day that we're seeing, or if we're supposed to think somehow that maybe there were 4 days where Josh and Christian were like reading the Ruby Writer or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, were there 4 very boring days that we just didn't get to see at all? Because for the most part, they go like, oh, Connie left yesterday. Like, oh, we haven't seen Mark since last night. Like, there's so much referencing the previous day as the previous day. But maybe
Mhm.
there's space. I didn't go line by line after the fact. But one discussion that I hinted at earlier that I think is worth having is that a lot of people, and I saw a TikTok about this, and I will share that on our story just because I don't want to look it up right now. But I will share it on Instagram to give credit to this person. But a lot of people consider this sort of a good for her movie because they're like good for Danny for finally kicking her ancient boyfriend to the curb in a very elaborate way. And then other people are like, this is not a good for her movie because it's you sympathize with her turning on Christian in that way, but it is not necessarily righteous, which I think to a degree people want it to be in good for her. It's complicated. You want it to be a good
Yeah.
for her movie, and then you realize she doesn't actually have any agency in this, so it can't be a good for her movie. Like people talk about Gone Girl. Obviously, Amy Dunn is not like a morally righteous figure. That doesn't mean it's not a good for her movie because she has been wronged and she is taking the agency to address that wrong.
Yeah.
Danny is really not taking agency at any point because she doesn't have any agency to take. Like, even when she's choosing between the member of the Harga community to sacrifice or Christian to sacrifice, the woman standing behind Christian with the wheelchair like nods at her as if to be like, yes, pick Christian. And we don't even really see her make the choice. We just see that the choice is made. And also she's being indoctrinated into a white supremacist cult.
Yeah, there's also that
That's like a
part
very
too.
big factor as well.
That's a
That's
really
the
big
fun
factor
part,
of it.
you know?
The thing that I'll say is that, I agree. She doesn't really make that choice at the end, even though it's her choice, the maid queen chooses or whatever. But also, it's kind of like how, just for if I was her, and I can't put my brain fully into her shoes because that doesn't make sense. Um, because I haven't taken 10,000 shrooms today,
Sure.
but
Has your
how do you
friend taken
choose between
10,000 trips today?
my friend hasn't even done that, and they love shrooms. Um, but what was I saying?
Sorry, I shouldn't have
Oh,
interrupted. I saw a low
no, no,
hanging
no, no,
joke.
no. It was worth it.
Thank
It
you.
was worth it, and I'm glad that you did it. Um, what I'm trying to say is that she's choosing between Christian, someone who, from all that she's seen, let's look at her perspective. She doesn't know that the cult has completely orchestrated his infidelity. Like, she is only seen him be a bad friend, forget her birthday, be not give a shit about any of the shady shits that's going on. Like when she's like, what the fuck? Why would Simon leave Connie
I could see you
behind? Where's
doing that.
Connie
A
now? All of
burn.
that. Yeah, That was so, I was like, ooh, things real bad right now. Like all she's seen is him be a bad person and ignore her this entire trip. And then she sees him having sex with someone while 40 women watch, you know?
Mhm.
So from her perspective, that's her perspective. She's only seen that aspect of it. So it's choose to kill someone who has wronged you and you know has the capacity to do bad things. Obviously, we know the reality where it was a rape situation for him. But from her eyes, that's what she's seeing. Or a stranger. You're killing a stranger who is the family of all the people who are surrounding you, you know?
Mhm.
That kind of pushes you in a certain direction. But
Especially if you're
maybe
trying to stick around, you know what I mean? If you're trying to stick around and be part of this community now, which you've essentially been indoctrinated against your will, because she becomes the May Queen, and then that other girl is like, "We're family now. This means we're family now." Like nobody warned her ahead of time that that's what that would mean, but okay. Um, but yeah, I think you have the choice to choose someone who has wronged you and become a part of the community, or you have a choice to pick someone in that community and then potentially have to deal with the fallout of that actions if you're staying within the community. But also just something that is interesting from IMDb trivia, while we're talking about their relationship a little bit and what she saw as infidelity, it's super interesting because Christian and Danny never kiss in this movie. They never kiss in this movie. Danny gets kissed by Pele. Christian kisses Maya as part of his participation in the ritual. There is a kiss, I guess, that existed that got cut from the movie, but is part of the director's cut. So I would love to see what that situation was, because I feel like it is the right choice to not have it in the film. And so I'd be very interested at what they did think was appropriate to include in the director's cut, or what they did initially include in the script. So I'd love to see what that is, but I think it is so effective that they like never kiss at any point in the movie, and it shows. There's a scene with Colin and Connie and Simon earlier on, where they're talking about their relationships, because Connie and Simon are engaged now, and they're like, "Oh, Ingmar is gonna officiate our ceremony. Best of luck." But we see them like standing there with their arms around each other, and the camera work is framing them standing together with Christian on one side of them and Danny on the other side of them, and like 4 feet of space in between, and Connie and Simon being like, "We're engaged. How long have you guys been together?" And they don't even have an answer that they agree on. You know what I mean? Like,
not even on the same page.
The physical and emotional distance is like so well represented in this movie with, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand a lot of the times, you know what I mean, in relationships. But I think it's a really great visual representation that we're never shown them behaving in that way, and they just don't really at that point in their relationship. And I think that's interesting.
That's so sad.
Anyway, should we go to our segments?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So
nope,
fucking hell. Nope, not those. The segments anyway.
Segments.
How could it be gayer?
Okay, I've got one. This is also inspired in a little bit by a TikTok that I saw. And that just generally speaking, I have been thinking that we always ask, how could things be gayer? And we tend to interpret that in a pretty gay, lesbian, bisexual kind of way. And we haven't talked much about like trans identity or being non-binary or anything like that. And so I'm going to make a more dedicated effort to keeping that lens in mind as well. But there was that really funny Scream 2 TikTok that I shared on our Instagram story, where Dewey is like, "You could already know the killer. It's probably the killer's probably, I don't know what he says. He's something like him or her or them." And somebody was like, "Haha, non-binary representation." There's a moment slightly like that in this film, where they first are approaching the Harga community, and the guy who greets them is like, "I'm wearing a dress." That's to represent the hermaphrodite nature of nature. And and I think that is a gender fluid representation. So that's one way that this movie
It's
is a little
already
gay already. Although then they have very gendered roles in their community. So I think that they could bring that philosophy a little further into Harga if they're going to be like, this is the gender fluid nature of nature, and then be like, that's a women's thing, that's a men's thing. Like, expand your belief system.
Expand your mind.
Gender
Take
is
a
a
few more
spectrum.
shrooms, honey.
Yes. But also Danny's best friend should have been her girlfriend.
True. That would have solved a lot of problems,
You
and then the movie would have kind of just ended.
Relying on a man is a risky choice to make. Sometimes it's the right choice. Sometimes you should. But generally speaking, if you have a female best friend that you can rely on instead, she's going to come through for you more often. She's just going to come through for you more often.
I also would say that Danny now has like 20 super hot BFFs
Sure.
that she did that big scream cry thing with, which was very deeply intimate and opened up probably a lot of doors. Especially the girl who held her hand through the entire May Queen thing, you know. I know Pele is trying to get it, but you know, she could do some polygamy stuff. I'm sure that's chill. Because Pele, I mean, say what you want, Howie's bad mastermind bringing people to the slaughter, but he do be hot, and he did say some nice emotional things. And he do be good at drawing, and so I
He's
like
got
that.
at least some emotional intelligence.
Yeah, they didn't present the community as having like defined couples either. They said like the elders have to approve every match. But to me, that probably means more in terms of like making a baby than it means like just a regular smash sesh.
Yeah,
so I think
just mashing them lips together, you know.
Even if she chose to smash with Pele, that I don't think that rules out anything with any of the other lovely ladies there in the Harga community.
I think that would be a really great thing
I think Pele
to explore.
Probably bisexual. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It feels like a very
that's canon.
I think this community should embrace being more gender fluid, and I think they should embrace that sexuality is also a spectrum, and we should have gotten that in the movie.
I agree.
I do feel Ruben, I don't know that any pronouns were ever used for Ruben, and personally I could not confirm within myself. I feel like Ruben probably was supposed to be a man. But it was one of those things where I wasn't sure. And so I feel Ruben could be a member of the non-binary community or the gender fluid community.
Ruben was not burdened by like
gender constructs,
earthly thoughts, nor fucking gender constructs. Exactly.
Ruben doesn't have an gender, like a strong gender identity, which I think is very non-binary, frankly. But also, if I'm not non-binary, so if that's wrong,
Ruben just doesn't fuck with that shit, and they don't need to. So good for them. Okay, so where would Matthew Lillard fit?
I think if we were typecasting Matthew Lillard, he would obviously be Mark. You know what I mean? Who's like the funny, comedic
dick,
little absolute dick of a friend. You know what I mean? That's where he would traditionally be slotted in, but we've got free reign to cast him however we like. This is our movie now.
I would like to see him with a lovely Swedish accent and be Pele.
I could see that. Or Ingmar. Or Ulf. I also would say for me, I don't want him to be in this movie because I would be too distracted by the fact that Matthew Lillard is in it. Like, it was already too much for me that Chidi was in it, you know? And that like just took me out of it quite a bit because I was really, really into The Good Place right when this movie came out. So I was like, okay, well, this is incredibly distracting. Fun fact, I saw, what is his name? William Jackson Harper at the what's it called? Hardware store by my house. His girlfriend. And they fucking cut me in line.
Well, they deserved to. They're celebrities. So
no, they don't. They didn't understand how the line works. I was like, why do you think I'm standing over here? For fun? No, the line forms behind me, bitch. Anyway, I was like, all right, well, at least I get to look at you guys longer. So thanks.
They said, we know you're trying to stare. We'll just step right here in front of you.
Very rude. Anyway, his girlfriend's hot, so good for him.
Good for him.
Any other placements for Maddie?
I
think
don't think I
that's-
would want him as Christian.
No.
I don't. He would be fine as Josh. You know what I mean? But I don't have like strong feelings for casting him in this movie. Frankly, I think
Okay.
everyone is
I'm with
everyone
you.
is so well cast as is.
Yeah,
Um.
really well cast.
That there's no place where I'm like this movie would have benefited from having Maddie Lily in this role here. But I also think you could put him anywhere. You know what I mean? A young Maddie
could do
Lily could
anything.
be at the party in the beginning. A young Maddie Lily could be one of the firefighters who walked by in Danny's family's
be-
home.
He could be one of the Scandinavian people who's just like yelping in the background at the end when the temple's burning down and Ingmar and Ulf are dying, so everyone's super sad and they're like, he could
yes,
just be like
experiencing that
out there
radical
going,
empathy.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. That would be fine with me. But more than that, it would be a distraction. Sorry, Maddie. Love
Sorry,
you.
Maddie. We'll get you next time.
Okay. Look at you. Oh, we surely
We
will.
surely will.
But next up, we've got to have the dumb bitch. And I mean, like, there's so many. But for me, it's Mark or it's Christian, but it's Mark because Christian had bad things happen to him. But I feel like it's Mark for me. The first half of the movie, I'd be like, is Christian 100% because I hated him so much. But now that we've talked so much about all the horrible things that actually do happen to Christian in this, I felt bad about hating him so much. But I still hate him just as much. He didn't deserve what happened to him, but I still fucking hate him. To be clear.
First part Christian, dumb bitch. Just like the first half of the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it still might be Christian regard. I mean, it's hard to say that it's not Mark for peeing on the ceremonial tree of ancestors.
And just being a little
you know what I mean?
bitch ass the whole fucking
and then
time.
to be like, I just had to pee. Like, babe, you know how bathrooms work. You've heard of the concept of bathrooms. You already
like
know that
that
it would be like rude to randomly pee. There's no reason to randomly pee outside regardless. But to pick the tree that they just scattered their ancestors' ashes on, like, please have some spatial awareness. Have some awareness of the world around you.
The act itself is terrible, but like I said, the reaction is what seals the deal. Where he's like, "Oh, I didn't fucking know." Blah blah blah. Like Ulf is about to murder you. You say you're sorry. My God. And also at the beginning of the movie, when he's like, "See that girl? You could be impregnating her right now." Fuck off. Why? Christian's not ready for a child. He hasn't even picked his thesis yet.
But I do think I did make one note that was like, he has a line that's like, God, I want to give her a bath. And I said, horny legend Mark. And I just thought that was a great line.
That's hilarious. It's a great line.
He is a dumb bitch, but he's also so funny to me in this movie that
we needed him.
And I also feel like he, other than peeing on the tree, he's just like along for the ride the whole time. You know what I mean? He's just like fun, a trip to Sweden. And maybe that is dumb bitch behavior to just be like, yay, I thought we were going to go to the sex club in Stockholm. What do you mean we're going straight to your Harga Midsommar festival? Like, that is dumb bitch to have absolutely no awareness of the world around you or of the plan that you've crafted and agreed to participate in.
Yeah. Agreed. Also, though, very smart of Pele to have it be like that because they're supposed to be there for like what, a month or a month and a half, something like that, and they do this right at the beginning, so no one's going to be looking for them for like in the States for like a month and a half,
and also
then
there won't
like probably 2 weeks after that they'll be like, where are they? You know,
there won't be any record of them like talking to anybody else in Sweden being like, we're going to this place, we're going to this thing, like truly no, like we're going north to blah blah blah, like no information whatsoever. Like it is only once they're perhaps like in the car, maybe I forget where this scene takes place, but in the car that he's like, we're not going to Sweden, we're not going to Stockholm, and Pele's like, that's the opposite direction. So like it's possible in that moment that Mark is not a dumb bitch, but that Pele like specifically didn't even give them any information about like what region of the country the Harga
World,
community is
yes.
in, you know what I mean? Like that they don't even know like which direction they're going in from the airport until they're like
Mhm.
on the road. But
All
I
right,
do
so
feel like
then- so-
Christian is very much still in the mix. You know what I mean? Because
I
it
feel
is
like it's
huge
Christian.
dumb bitch behavior to be like, yeah, I told you about this trip. What do you mean I didn't tell you about this trip? Like, oh, I told you. And then it is also huge dumb bitch behavior to go to your friends and be like, okay, I invited her, but she's not coming, even though she literally has bought up. Like, at what point do you go, wait, maybe she
You're
is
leaving in a
coming? You know what I mean? Like they're leaving in a week. She said she's coming. Presumably she
Ugh.
has started to like make sure her passport is up to date. And presumably she has taken material actions to join this plan. You know what I mean? It's not abstract at that
Mhm.
point. You need to be buying a plane ticket. You need to be getting any necessary vaccinations to travel. You need to be making sure that your passport hasn't expired and
Yeah.
getting a rush passport renewal if you must. Like there are
No,
steps
yeah, I
that
mean-
have to be taken. And so for him to be like, she's coming, but it's not gonna happen. Like, why do you think that it's not gonna happen?
No, it's
Why do
all
you think
master
that?
manipulation. He
He thinks he can
is
like
just
trick
such
her
a
into being like,
manipulating person.
don't you think it'll be better for you if you stay home? Don't come to this party for 45 minutes. Don't you think you want to sleep so that I can see my friends? Don't come to Sweden.
And you
don't
don't
you think
bring
you
down
want
the
to?
vibe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure he
Yeah.
thought that he could like mind trick her into wanting to stay and thinking it's her idea. And he's good at it to a degree in this sense
No,
that
it is.
he's not good at it because he's not graceful at all, but he has relationship has come to such a point, no matter whose fault it is in getting it there, that Danny, if she realizes that she has upset Christian, will absolutely bend over backwards to not upset him and to
Try
be
to
like,
save it,
oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry that I made you mad. Like, oh, I'm sorry that I didn't remember that you were being
Yeah.
serious about this trip. That's my fault then. And I apologize. How do I make you feel better about the fact that you did something wrong and I called you on it and now you're upset?
Girl, you're better off. She's better off. But I mean, minus the whole being a part of a cult
Sure,
thing,
sure,
but
sure,
like,
sure, sure,
you
sure,
know,
sure, sure,
maybe
sure.
that'll work out for her. Good for her. In that regard. But I will say that it's just shocking to see how he always thinks that he's in the right too.
Yeah.
Like he can convince himself of all of these things so wholeheartedly that I'm almost impressed, you know, just like Josh says, it's like, I can't believe you'd had the audacity. That's what I thought so many times. I was like, the audacity that he has to even think about some of these things that he's actually doing is almost impressive.
Yes.
So yeah, I think he's the dumb
Sorry,
bitch.
this is completely unrelated, but I forgot to mention it earlier. Just a small Easter egg for you. When we see Danny's computer screen, when it shows for the first time the email her sister Terry has sent her, you see two previous messages from Terry with YouTube links, and I looked up what the YouTube links were too, and one of them is the first ever 3D VR filmed in space, and the second one is Relaxing Yellowstone River Live. They're both National Geographic.
Oh,
Beautiful,
wow.
Chelsea.
Amazing.
I just wanted to share that because I was like, oh, I wonder what those links are. And I took the time to look it up and I was like, now other people will know. And I will also put that on our social media.
All right, so now we got to do our knives out of fives. And Chelsea, set the scene for us. What is the vibe? What did people think?
The vibe is that this movie got a 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it got 83% fresh from critics and 63% fresh from audiences, which is like a 20% difference. You know what I mean? That's pretty freaking huge. Personally, I think this movie is very artistic and again, like we've said earlier, not necessarily scary, but I think a really strong piece of cinema, a really strong piece of art. So I definitely side more with the critics when it comes to this one. I think for me, I don't really have any complaints about this movie other than the like timeline thing, which I just think is weird, but I think, you know, you really have to be like going back and checking to notice that. That's not necessarily something you're going to notice at all when you're watching the film. So that is like an extra level. But other than that, I don't have a lot I would change. I don't have a lot I would fix. I think the central takeaway being like, this is a cult of radical empathy, but who is allowed to be offered empathy is like a good way to think about and remember the world in general. Like, it is so great to have empathy for people, but remember who you're offering your empathy to and who you're not offering your empathy to. For me, this is like a 5 knives out of 5 movie. I think it's great. I think it's really beautiful and gorgeous, and I think the cinematography is so stunning.
Totally. I mean, I'm right there with you, but like, and I'm glad to see that the reviews from others and those scores were so high, because I wasn't expecting that, because when I first Googled this movie to pull up some articles, people also ask, you know, that part on Google, the first question is, why is Midsommar so bad? And the second question is, what is the point of Midsommar? And so I thought that was fucking hilarious. That literally the first question is that.
God, rude.
Can't relate. I love this movie the first time I saw it. I love this movie the second time I saw it. I loved it that time. I saw only half of it. I loved it when I watched it recently over the weekend. I will say I think I watched the extended cut. I think there's 3 cuts, and I'm not sure. There's a normal one that's 2 hours and 18 minutes long. Then there's the one I watched, which was 2 hours and 27 minutes long. And then there is the director's cut, which is like 3 hours long. So I watched the medium one, and there were some parts that were in it that were not in the versions I'd seen before. So I was like, what is going on? I thought I was going crazy. I was like, am I like my friend who does shrooms and have eyes on for the first time right now? But I hadn't, and I was just confused. So there's sometimes where it goes a little long. I think that the whole Oracle Reuben part of it should have been fleshed out a little bit more, because it was a pretty big thing to drop and not do anything really with it at all, you know, in my opinion. But that said, I think this movie is art. I think this movie is high art. It's so gorgeous. The world building is incredible. I'm all about that attention to detail. That's why I used to like Disneyland so much, you know. Even the queue was beautiful. So even the parts where nothing was really going on, it was still stunning. And so yeah, I love this movie. It's 5 out of 5 knives for me, and I can't wait to see what Ari Aster does next.
I am terrified now that we've both given it 5 knives out of 5, and we're ending on Sydney, who is most certainly not going to give it 5 knives out of 5.
Oh, it's going to be like a
Sydney,
0.
If you didn't like this movie, can you do like a compliment sandwich for us, perhaps, maybe?
I need y'all to stick with me and not say anything. Okay.
I will listen,
and that's a promise.
Quietly and non-judgmentally.
I'll drink water the whole time, so
So
I can't
I would
talk.
probably give it, like, again, this movie,
it's not for you. Sorry. It is. I'm quiet now.
It is beautiful. It is so just like aesthetically pleasing to watch. It's not, I don't consider it a horror movie. It doesn't fall into that category for horror. And for that, I would do a 3.5 out of 5. But because the boyfriend reminded me so much of my ex-boyfriend, and she got to light his ass on fire in a bear suit, I'll give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah! Got him.
We got that bonus point.
Amazing. This is amazing. Sydney has sort of been okay with a movie that I love with my whole entire heart. She gave a movie that I chose higher than a 3.5. Well, this is outside of Get Duked. Whenever I put my fucking fancy world building slow burn horror movies on the docket, she's always like 3.5 out of 5, which isn't a terrible score. Even I shouldn't even be that mad, but I'm just angry always.
I just thought it was funny because literally we shared this on our Instagram story earlier today because Sydney put it on her story. But literally earlier today, Monica in our group chat said, "Here's why liking something I don't like makes you a bad person. It's a reductress link." And Sydney said, "Monica, to me, every time I give one of her movies a 3.5, the exact score. The exact score. And then you said 3.5, and I went, no. But we looped it back around. You told us to wait for it. We waited for it. It paid off. Thank you, Sydney.
Listen, there's
nothing that hurts more than you loving something so much and sharing it with someone, and they're like, I hated it. And then it hurts. But I'm glad that, you you had that triggering connection to the film.
I did.
You got to play out that justice for yourself. So I'm happy.
Anyway, that about wraps us up for Midsommar, which brings us to next week, in which we will be discussing the 1996 Reese Witherspoon movie, Fear. I don't know if it is technically considered a horror movie, but it is certainly in the like psychological thriller realm, which is pretty spooky. You know what I mean? So I think it works for our purposes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the only one who has seen this movie. I showed you guys the trailer so you have like an idea. But the only thing that I knew going in was that Gil Grissom from CSI was in it, and that there is a very pivotal scene with a roller coaster that I am so excited to share.
Ooh.
Really looking forward to it. Looking forward to revisiting it because I only watched it the one time a few years ago, but I remember it being good maybe, and also having a great inclusion of the song Wild Horses, so I'm
Ooh.
fully ready to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say from the trailer alone, even if this isn't necessarily a horror movie, it is scary how hot Mark Wahlberg looks in this trailer. Like I didn't expect to feel this way. So can't wait to see how that plays out for me personally. But if you liked what you heard, why not rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts? I think it would make you feel good, and I know it would make me feel good. And while we're at it, why don't you just follow us on all of our social media platforms at spooky_Tuesday on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And also, we are on Tumblr and Facebook at Spooky Tuesday Pod. Thanks for listening, friends.
Bye, spookies.
Spooky Tuesday was created by Monica Height, Sydney Thompson, and Chelsea Duff, and edited by Sydney Thompson. Our gorgeously spooky tunes are all thanks to Tamara Simons, who you can follow on Instagram at Captain Tamara, and our podcast art is by Mary Murphy, who you can find on Instagram at the_moon_OMG.
So we're just gonna ignore the bed.
It's a bear.